ladies, this morning we're really trying to get to the bottom of what's going on in the minds of our children these days, that we're hearing incidences, and this is from Dr. Shaheda Omar, one of our panelists, saying that as young as 5 years old are trying to commit offences of a sexual act, and it's difficult to understand it really. As Janine Raftopoulos is the Manager of Communications and Public Education at the Film and Publication Board, and then of course I've also got William Bird, Director at the Media Monitoring Africa. I said before the break that we were going to try and talk about the censorship issue, and I know that there's something lingering, and a lot of people are aware of it, some are not aware of it. Talk to us about what's going on.
So there's been a move to expand the role, really, I guess, and the mandate of the Film and Publications Board. So if you look at all of your TV programs, you'll see there's always a little rating doodah.
Yes.
Any of the DVDs you buy, all of that kind of thing. That's the critical role that I think the Film and Publications Board plays, in that it starts to educate users, listeners, readers, audiences of whatever persuasion that this is the kind of classification that something's been given, which is critical. Of course, one of the big gaps identified is how do you deal with this online space. Now, there's been a lot of criticism against these draft online regulations. I think in many respects they're quite valid, but I think that they do point to some very real issues that we have. And these kinds of scenarios, these sort of specific events, point to people's insecurities and their fears, and very legitimately so, about what your child is getting access to and what that might and what effect that might have on them. I think for us, what we need to make sure we do is say we need to take reasonable steps to protect our children. And there's a big difference between that and complete censorship, right? Which is, censorship is you be like the Chinese and you determine what people get to see,
yes,
and you have literally thousands of people doing it. Being responsible, it's a bit like you teach your child to cross the road. At some point you're going to let them do it on their own. Is there still a risk there? Yes, there is. But you have to, learn to determine where those borders are. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the internet and social media. Children are going to get access to this. Trying to roll it back, it's not possible. What you do want to do is start to give them the ability to empower themselves. And the research that they've done in Europe, they've done this massive Europe-wide research, shows that the children that are the most reasonable and best responsible on the internet are the ones that are exposed to risk, but they're encouraged to take risk in safer circumstances. And that's the kind of environment that I think we need to look at. You want to encourage children to be inquisitive. You want them to look for these things, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that there's a way that they can get information. Where the internet and these kinds of images become particularly dangerous is in an unsupported environment. So where a child sees these things, there's no adult they can talk to, their friends are in the same kind of thing, they're exposed to violence all the time, and their lives are often very, very challenging in a range of other respects. That's when the media then, in that instance, can play a very, very damaging role. But it can also, as I said, play an opposite function.
I mean, everything that you're pointing to is the fact that the parent needs to be there. The parent needs to be there for the child, give the kid advice as to what they can and they cannot do. They need to watch them. I mean, I know my friends with children that are older take their phones on a daily or weekly basis. They check what their children have been doing. They've got firewalls up. They've got all of these things in place. I'm not sure if they work or not. William, you shrug your shoulders as well. But, I mean, you were saying it's these unattended children that can do what they like. So we need to monitor them. And as much as you do as a Film and Publications Board, we need to enforce more.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. This is not a one-shoe-fits-all approach. The FPB, through the draft online regulation policy, we've realized that this has to be a co-regulation thing. Industry has to be on board. Parents have to be on board. And we, as the public entity, have to be on board. It's got to be a multiple approach. Otherwise, we're just not going to succeed. We're not the only country going through this. There's lots of other countries that are needing to regulate the space.
Even though, believe me, when my kid looks at the triangle in the corner and it says PG or it says 13, and I say, listen, I don't think you should watch it, but they say I can. So they believe you more than they believe me.
Well, this is why our onus is to inform. And then you choose whatever is comfortable within your home and space and child.
Indeed, indeed. Just finally, just to wrap, we almost finished on SABC 2 before we move over to Channel 404. Shaheda, we talk about children that don't have that family, that home, that advice, the people to turn to. How bad is it in South Africa?
Well, it's very bad. I think if we just go back to some studies that we conducted, we found that a lot of the children did not have an adequate male role model. The there was lack of paternal presence in the home, even where father figures were physically available, emotionally were not accessible and available to these children. So that has a huge impact on children and identification with a male role model.
Indeed.
And I think it's also important to understand that the family unit has a huge influence on the behavior of the child. In dysfunctional families where children witness domestic violence, neighborhood violence, this becomes a way, and they assimilate this into their behavioral repertoire. And also, I think, just picking up quickly on the role of TV as being the electronic surrogate caregiver of children, we found that 76% of children that we had interviewed at schools confirmed that they were watching unsupervised at all hours.
Okay. And that's the problem. All right, I have to leave it there. We've got a wrap on SABC2, unfortunately. Channel 404 is where the conversation is going to continue. So if you have access, tune in there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Shap, shap. Etada.